Good morning. Let's look at verse 15 and 16 together. What then, this is Romans 6, what then, are we to sin because we are not under law but under grace? By no means. Do you not know that if you present yourselves to anyone, offer yourselves to anyone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one whom you obey, either of sin, which leads to death, or of obedience, which leads to righteousness? This is such an important verse. The implications of this verse are that if you continually offer yourselves to sin, then your character is going to be formed by sin, and you're going to obey that master. If you continually offer yourself to righteousness, then righteousness will be your character, and your character becomes your master. Think about it this way. It's often said that the sum total of your habits is your character. So as you sow daily habits, as you sow hourly habits, as you sow weekly habits, build it out, build it out, build it out. It forms a kind of character for you that ends up dictating what you do. You become a slave to it. You're a slave of the one whom you obey, either of sin that leads to death, or of obedience, which leads to righteousness. So I want to think of this a little bit with you about the games we play in regard to sin. As you come to sin, sometimes we don't think of sin in terms of that presentation that we've talked about, right? Remember going back a little earlier in chapter 6, we said in verse 12 that we're not to let sin reign in our mortal bodies, and that we're not to, verse 13, present our members as to sin as instruments for unrighteousness, because that presentation is a willful act. We're presenting ourselves. That's what sin is. We're availing ourselves for the opportunity to be unrighteous. So when it comes to the willfulness of sin, it seems to me, real quick, I want to run through this, that there are 5 different games that we can play in our language about sin. So, or in the way we view sin. The first one is the language game. And I mentioned this earlier. We talk about sin as a kind of hiccup or a mistake or a struggle. We use language that diminishes the active, willful presentation of ourselves to unrighteousness. Secondly, we can play the comparison game. We sort of compare ourselves to others. We're struggling, but not like so-and-so. And we give ourselves a bit of a righteous standing based upon a comparison to somebody who's not as far along as we are. Third, we play the blame game. We get in relationships and we get angry, for example, or we say, well, you make me angry, or I wouldn't do this if you didn't fill in the blank, or yeah, I understand what you're saying, but he or she does da 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 da. Number 4, the excuse game. We make excuses for ourselves. Well, we just get caught up in stuff. We just get caught up in the moment. Well, you have to understand the way I respond. I'm just an emotional person, or I'm just somebody who's real expressive. We use this kind of language as a personality way of excusing ourselves and excusing our behavior. So the language game, the comparison game, the blame game, the excuse game, and finally, I'll call it the myopic whiner game. Well, you understand, I'm battling lust, for example, but it's just so hard in today's culture. It's always in front of you. Right? It's always in front of you. It's hard to pay attention, because it's just the culture just kind of always trying to grab your attention, different media and so forth. Yes, we have different challenges, but that doesn't allow us to get narrow focused and whine about it as though we're victims of culture. So when it comes to sin, I want you to keep in mind that you have a responsibility and I have a responsibility to present ourselves in such a way that we don't become slaves to sin, because our habits form our character, and we don't get to sort of play games with sin in our language and our rhetoric. Instead, we are to be slaves to righteousness, because that's how we'll form godly character. May the Lord bless you this day.